From my perspective, is the industry is now appreciating trade finance solutions going forward, and we have seen a few activities happening in the market and also globally, where most of the financiers have now realigned their strategy towards trade finance solutions. And for me, that's how I see it now. There is a bit of appreciation in terms of what trade finance can be able to do. And so more so locally here, since the capping of the interest rates, banks have tried to look at how on their models and how best they can be able to offer solutions going forward. So there could be, if you ask me, there will be a paradigm shift, and trade finance will be the focus on most of the financiers on their strategy going forward. Initially, most banks or most financiers didn't want to innovate. We are used to the normal conventional banking, where we only know loans, short-term, long-term, medium-term loans, project financing, real estate. That has been the main thing that most banks have been focusing on, or even overdraft. But we have reached a level where, especially now with the new, you've seen like the figures for the non-performing loan from an industry perspective have been on the rise. That has made everyone to sit down and refocus and think, is there another better way of doing it? And then you realize now the better way of doing it is doing it on a transactional basis. And that's why you've seen a lot of what people are calling transactional banking. It's trying to do trade finance from a transactional point of view. You're looking at a specific transaction, you structure, you offer a solution against that particular transaction specifically. So basically, you can see there is a bit of operation, there is that shift in a small way, but now is likely to be bigger opportunity going forward. Even now, it's even more, also it's coming up very well, because you realize most of the transactions, the way they are being done, you find there will be the initial bit of negotiation of the contract. The contract terms between the buyer and the seller, or procuring entity and a contractor. And when they are doing those contracts, they are mentioning, or they are putting clauses to say how this contract will be, what will be the payment terms. When they are putting those payment terms, you realize maybe the procuring entity will say, I need a performance bond of 10%. I need XYZ, or I'll give you a letter of credit to facilitate your importation. So you realize as it's going, by the time the customer is coming directly to the bank, he already knows what he wants, because there is a contract behind him. There is a contractual obligation behind him. So when he's coming to the bank, he's coming straightforward and saying, hey, this is what I'm looking. If you look at most of the government-related agencies procuring or buying of sale or purchases, they are based on a contract, and that contract will specifically say you need to provide a performance bond of X percentage of this value. We'll give you, or you need to give advance payment guarantee for purposes of us giving you some mobilization fee. So you realize it is also being, the trade uptake is also being pushed from the contract point of view. So that push vis-a-vis now the customer also coming to the bank and asking, I have XYZ, or I've won this contract. I need some facilitation to start digging up the work or do some civil works for this and this and this. You realize now the bank says, okay, why do you want this? The customer says, I have a contract. So it goes to the contract financing. So again, you find now, instead of the normal way I would have given you an OD, yeah, now I'm specifically focusing on that particular contract. I'm able to structure within that. That is now what is also again pushing the industry. So people have started appreciating that you may need to deal with a transaction per transaction. So the uptake is also having that push. I would say there was also a bit of issue of ignorance, because people don't want to get tired of thinking or innovating around it. The easiest everyone knew about banking is a loan and an overdraft. So when I walk in, and trade has also been regarded as a technical kind of department, or a technical, you need other specific solutions or specific skills, because some of the international rules governing the trade finance are done by International Chamber of Commerce. So people are trying to find a way, an easier way. Instead of knowing what UCP's rules governing LCs, as a relationship person, I'm not interested in this. This is a client who wants money. So the easiest is an overdraft and loan. So there's a bit of not interrogating much more or trying to think ahead, what else can I be able to do? And also in terms of the knowledge gap. The knowledge gap was also an issue in terms of there are no other people. You find that trade finance is a one department with very few staff, but it's supposed to be a product department supporting the rest of business units. So the interaction between the business and the products also was a bit limited. And so much because they are thinking if these products are being run by these people, then they are special in a way. So I don't want to go that route. I would rather sort my client here and now and we move on. So there was also a bit of issue of the knowledge gap. But with the two happenings of the capping of interest, people have started thinking of the non-funded or commission and commissions, fees and commissions as another revenue making. So that also has now made people to realize and start learning what trade finance is all about. There are people who have benefited, and mostly people like the contractors. You find most contractors, and I mean contractors of the roads, the building, and all that. Most of those people, and any person who also deals with the importation, those people are slightly aware of the trade solutions or trade finance per se. Because when they are dealing with those big contracts, they have either interacted with the guarantees and also they have interacted with the LCs. And to some extent, they have also interacted with certificate or some discounting or some contract financing. So those have so much benefited to that extent. But you realize there are other SMEs or upcoming businesses. Them, they think of only the normal buying and selling without properly say, okay, somebody wins a contract, but he doesn't think of how I'm going to finance it. Because he thinks, if I get this contract or this tender, then tomorrow I start supplying, then I'll get payment maybe the next day. But that is not always what has happened. Because also when people are trying to or are getting contracts, they don't think of how am I going to secure this. So people have become wiser. They start even on the contract, they negotiate. Initially, you'd go, you have won a tender, you're given a contract, you are told go read, but people don't read, you just sign. And it's a normal generic contract. You just put pen to paper. But without thinking through or reading through, how is this going to affect my business? Is it within my model business? People have started appreciating that doing business is a matter of negotiations. You negotiate, you put it in a contract, then you go ahead and now structure it within that contract. Yes, it has, because number one, trade finance is not very expensive. In fact, if you look at it, it's a save to the finance cost. If you look at the statements of such companies that have been assisted through trade finance, they make very good margin because their finance cost is less. So their net profit margin, again, it is healthy and it improves. Secondly, in terms of them being efficient is very critical because they focus on what they know, their core business, and they leave the rest of the financing matter to the bank, because you find, because they go to the bank to get financing on their mismatch of their either revenues and outflows, then they're able to structure something. So they may not have monthly obligations, but they have obligations that will be offset by a particular payment coming off and offsetting everything. So in that basis, then they're able to have more efficiency in terms of operation, because they're able to focus on what they know best. They're able, because a specific contract to execute within the time frame, because there is no bank or somebody following them to pay up their debt. They have a proper financing background or a financier who comes in when they are required. If it's some money to do the contract, they already have. If it's some money awaiting payment, they already have. So they're able always to be in the move, and their cycle is always complete. So they're able to improve on those efficiencies. The regulation, I don't think there's any hindrance in terms of regulation, because the regulation, even if you look at the Public Procurement Authority or Act, it cuts across, it allows all the instruments, the bid bonds, the performance bond, the LCs and all that, and they acknowledges them as a payment modes. So I wouldn't say there is any hindrance in terms of any law known that to have hindrance. And number two, most of these contracts, by the time they are coming to, it should be a mutually negotiated document. Companies may have their own internal policies to do X, Y, Z, but as a matter of it, it is also something that people can sit down and mutually agree when they execute some of these contracts. From a bank perspective, there is no law that again hinders offering of trade finance solutions, because it is solutions, they are products that banks sell, they are within the prudential guidelines, they are within the banking space. In fact, the more of it is, there should always be an innovation of products. It's generic, the framework is open, it's just people to plug in specific solutions within that. So from where I stand, I don't think there's any regulation that cuts or whatever. And number two, when it comes to the international rules or international standards, again, they cut across, they're applicable across board, across the world, okay? And none that would hinder any business. Because remember, any business is between the buyer and the seller. As much as the bank is to come in to facilitate, there is again the mutual acceptance between the buyer and the seller that they're in the business of them doing the business, as much as the financial or the bank is coming in between. And not at the moment, because even the regulations we have, I don't think we have utilized any that has that is hindering any execution. Yeah, especially from a bank perspective. I know the capping issue has become an issue. Okay, maybe that may need to be reviewed, because either way, within the trade finance, they are funded solutions. So there has to be an avenue that when you're pricing some of those transactions, again, you are compensated for the risk you are taking. So if there is a way it can be that, then that's the only way or whatever. But otherwise, even with the capping, it has again regenerated to banks trying to innovate within trade finance. But again, not all transactions can fit in within those solutions that or instrument or being LCs or guarantees. There still be those funded, and therefore that funding is again affected by the capping of the interest. So that's the only law that I would say, maybe, okay, there are processes to be reviewed of it. And I think we would rather leave it to them to decide on how it goes on that end. Yeah. The technology bit is constantly improving, and even of late we have seen some blockchain solutions on how to perform some trade finance. We have seen some global banks have confirmed having executed some transaction through blockchain. In our market, maybe you have not reached that level of trying up with a transaction, but it's happening globally. And for me, I'd say technology is going to also change how trade finance is also doing. The biggest of it, I won't call it as a threat, for me is an opportunity, the technology, because we can't do away with it. If we're already doing it in the blockchain as a trade finance transaction, then it's likely one day to be able to come to the market, and maybe people will start appreciating that. But for now, I mean, we just read as it is that is happening. It's for our own information, and I think it's something we may need to look at going forward.
So it's something that's set to boost.
Yes, it's something that is going to boost, and the basic thing is, as much as these other businesses, the other technology that happens, the normal systems the bank use support such transaction. Then the other thing that has also boosted is within the technological, there's these supply chain solutions. Those has also boosted the trade finance solutions, because you have the supplier financing solutions and factoring also coming into place, and is being done through the system, where we have a system that is linked to the customer, to the main buyer, and to a financier. Yeah, and all the suppliers of the main anchor are linked to that system. The financiers are also linked to that system, such that if I supply to a certain supply chain market, then if I want my invoices to be discounted just on a click of a button, it goes to a financier, whoever is interested, with or without an account, they're able to disburse money to me, and then they'll be paid by the main anchor. So those are some of the technologies that are helping or supporting or boosting trade finance as we go along. From my small economics is we were once told the government is the biggest buyer and is the biggest purchaser and is also the biggest spender. So going forward, we need to align ourselves within the government objectives. And the big four for me is a big, huge opportunity, be it in manufacturing, be it in medical sector. And if you just pick, say, even at the housing level, most of the things will be done, as much as some of them will be acquired locally, they will also be require maybe some importation, be it medical equipment, those ones, to some extent we have to import. So how are they going to be imported? So there is a thing to entrench yourself to purposes of LCs. Now, the people who are going to execute some of these contracts for the housing and all that, they require instruments, because that's the nature of the government. They require tendering process, they require performance bond if you win the contract, they require advance payment to support you to mobilize and all that. So those are opportunities again to entrench ourselves within the big four. So for me, it's a big opportunity, and we need to realign ourselves within the players within those sectors and many other sectors, because as much as they are big four, they'll have an impact on any other sector. Remember, even transport sector, will benefit, because all these equipment, all these materials, all this whatever will require to be delivered. And the other value add of other companies or other sectors within the value chain, they will also be affected, and affected in a positive way. So we need to align ourselves within that and be able to be ready for that, for those opportunities, and take up those opportunities going forward. Yes, and what we even advise is even trade finance can be done even to a startup. Because if you are tendering for a process or for you to get a contract, even if you are the first timer, and you see even the government to some extent has given leeway, they require 30% of every procurement to be done by women, youth, and the physically or the disabled persons. So when you look at even that sector or that avenue around, it means even 30% of the budgetary is there. So meaning even if a person from the company today and starts tendering, he'll be able to be supported by a small bid board and all that. When he wins those contracts, depending on who is the main contractor, again he can be supported. Because there are various ways of trying to mitigate any payment and performance risk. So long as those two are able to be done, then it can also be done. So there are opportunities for every other SME. The thing is the model. The solutions you are being given has to fit in within the specific requirement or specific need that is currently occurring. Otherwise, that's why we miss the boat in terms of somebody starts a company today and he falls tomorrow. It's because he thought it's an easy thing of just buying and selling or doing XYZ and all that, and he feels the point. He needs to concentrate on what is the best for the company. Then get a good financier who will be able to advise you and tell you, this is what we can be able to do, this is how we can offer the solution, and then you'll be able to have a sustainable strategy going forward. We should not do most of us are driven by the issue of making money, and making money very fast and easy way. There's no way of making easy money and a faster way. It has to be a process, and you must appreciate that process, because it will be a proper learning curve which will be able to help your business to grow. So at some point you may have 3 or 4 contracts. Yes, you started with one small one, but within a very less time you have many contracts that again now maybe you can't even catch up. We have seen even SMEs sometimes even dropping some of the contracts. They're saying, okay, you know what, for this year we are done. We need just to concentrate on this particular one. So the thing should be, one should not be driven by making money very fast, but so much of learning and be able to execute the specific contract that he has. Anyone doing trade finance, trade finance has solutions that can be able to help and move your business to the next level. And as at Credit Bank, we are prepared and ready to work with you through the journey. Try us.